Yo, what it is, YouTube? It's Playback coming back with another bullseye of a video here today on the channel. We want to show you how to get those crispy, professional, high definition sounding vocals using the API Vision Strip, an incredible tool that has a very dope modern clarity and presence to it. We're going to be using a pop vocal today, and it can also apply to R&B as well. So if y'all like the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Down below in the comments, suggest more videos. And if you guys want to book a mix or check out the studio, go ahead to playbackstudio.com, and down below in the link, check it out. And we're more than happy to work with you guys. All right, we have this beautiful studio here with this beautiful equipment. So let's listen to the music to start off.
I know the way you feeling. Of this being you, all I see this evening. You too sweet, baby, let out those demons. I'm pouring up, baby, tell me what you want. I just think you need some right there. What's it gonna take to get somewhere? I know when I see some real. I get lost again, I get lost in the moment.
Really dope. Okay, so the API is a really nice staple in audio, because it's one of the, I would say it's one of the late bloomers. It came out in the 1990s, and the API was known for the op amp. Okay, so that's kind of like the amplification circuit. So usually when you would use something like this, you already have to understand what tone it is, what flavor you're going for. Like when you do a barbecue rub, and you're about to barbecue some chicken, or you're gonna barbecue some beef ribs, you already start thinking about, man, what type of seasoning am I going to use? What type of propane gas? Am I going to use propane gas? Am I going to use wood? Am I going to use charcoal? Because all of these things will impact the flavor down the line. So we got the API Vision Strip, a really dope UAD plugin, but you could also get it if you don't have UAD, buying the native version. So, I like to use this when it comes to tracking vocals too, because of the input section. If you were on the UAD console, you throw on the mic mode, okay, and then you'd probably push the gain to somewhere in the middle region, somewhere around the 30 to 35 dB. But when you're actually mixing, you want to use the line mode. Okay, so the input and the output stage is fully modeled, okay? And this is the input, this is the output. So both of these have kind of like a certain type of flavor to them just by automatically running through it, all right? And that's why I like to go to the API a lot of the times. Another really dope plugin where you can find the op amp if you don't have the API is something like the Sound Toys plugins. If you go to the tweak, you'll usually see the analog style might have op amp. So they actually kind of modeled that seasoning, that flavor inside of the pantry. Now it's inside of your pantry, and maybe you could just turn off all the other settings for this plugin and only use the op amp. I know they're like no, I think there's some of the other Sound Toys plugins like Panman might offer the op amp in there too. So that's the specific, like the saturation component. All right, let's see what it sounds like with and without bypass.
I know the way you feeling. Of this being you, all I see this evening. You too sweet, baby, let out those demons. I'm pouring up, baby, tell me what you want. I just think you need some right there. What's it gonna take to get somewhere? I know the way you feeling. Of this being you, all I see this evening. You too sweet, baby, let out those demons.
So there's many advantages that you can take of from this plugin. You got to think about too the filters. The filters are really dope. Every channel strip has different dB octaves in terms of the filters. So this is why sometimes using an SSL might be better than the API, vice versa, or a Neve, right? The dB octave is kind of like the steepness of the filter. So I know like a SSL-E and a SSL-G, they have a 18 dB octave. So imagine you're like Gordon Ramsay or Bobby McFlay or whatever. You're a chef and you're sharpening your knife, right? Sometimes you don't want your knife to be too sharp. Sometimes you want a dull knife for a certain type of stuff. So that's what the dB octave is when it comes to filter. 18 being moderate, 12 being kind of like that loose type of friend, a pair of scissors that's not too sharp, 24 kind of being like a ninja knife, very deadly, that could slash you. All right, so understand, sometimes you want to look up the dB octave of the filters, because sometimes how much you're filtering on an SSL is not the same thing as the API vision. So I love having, like a graphic EQ like this to explain it. And I believe the dB octave of the top end is different too. I think it's somewhere like maybe 6. So, it's a lot more gentle on the high end. Very important stuff to know. And, those should play into your decisions why you pick this plugin when you do want to pick it. Then you have the compressor portion, which is the 225L. And I know that comes from the API console. And you got to think about the knees and stuff like that, right? So it's not like the knees on your legs, but the knees are usually something where it's the shape of the compression, right? Similar how the EQ might have a shape, right? Like the filters, sometimes if you have a harder knee, that will make the compression more jagged. Maybe for somebody who's singing, you want to use a softer knee because it will bring out the softer parts of their vocals. And maybe for somebody who's rapping, you want to use the harder knee, which is gonna bring a little bit more of a, like a, when you're Need for Speed Vin Diesel drift in the car, it brings a little bit more of a jagged edge. It's like a hard part of a door. Some doors, they have a soft bottom, other doors have a hard bottom. So if you hit it, you hit your leg on that hard end. It's the sharpness of the end. All right. So I did not use the compressor section here, but it's very dope. I don't think it actually sounds good on vocals, but it's good to explain it anyways. Okay. And then of course you have the ratio and you have the release and all that stuff like that. But usually for vocals, I would not use that. You have the limiter, not the limiter section, but the expander and the gate. And this is mostly cool for like drums, snares, kicks. If you were going to be using it on a vocal, a lot of the times I feel like you should make sure that you start off with a full depth and play around with your ratio. Maybe have your thing on the quickest release, and it's something that you really have to kind of mess around with. So usually when I mix R&B vocals, we're not using this. We're just using the filter, the input and the output, and the EQ. So the EQ is pretty dope. Okay, let's see what it sounds like bypass with and without EQ.
I know the way you feeling. Off this being you all I see this evening. You too sweet, baby, let out those demons. I know the way you feeling. Off this being you all I see this evening. You too sweet, baby, let out those demons. I'm pouring up, baby, tell me what you want. I just think you need something right there. What's it gonna take to get somewhere? I know when I see some real, I get lost again, I get lost.
All right, really dope stuff here. So let's talk about the EQ, why the EQ is actually different. It's called a proportionate EQ, right? So I believe with this one specifically, the more that you boost, the more narrower it becomes. So it's different from the other EQs, right? It's pretty much like if you click it on 2 dB, it's a pretty broad type of stroke, but the more dB you add, it starts to become more narrow. And I believe it also applies to the same thing as well, right? And in terms of like this, so called a proportionate EQ. So it's actually different. It's actually different from a lot of things. And usually with R&B vocals, I like to use like a shelf. Yeah. So a shelf is usually a situation where you're raising everything above it. So this is a way to get some really clean air. And I like to shelf, right? Because a shelf is going to work below some of the stuff below it. It's kind of like a mountain peak, right? So sometimes you want to put it to 20K so it's not touching any of the harshness, like the 5K, the 3K, the 4K. Some of the harsh mid-range parts can be, brought out and made more ugly, like with the magnifying glass. you know, if you go too low on a shelf, and maybe your vocal doesn't sound good enough to go low on a shelf. So 20K on a shelf is pretty good. And when I do something like that, I usually only do it for like the two, right? So it's pretty broad. I wouldn't go to any more past two, you know. A lot of the times when I start up on this plugin, a great technique is to play around with the filter and then play around with the low shelf and the bell. Yeah, so a low shelf is the same thing, It's all about sculpting your low end in terms of R&B vocals. You feel me? You might want to do like, okay, I done did just a little bit of this. Now I did a bell. You feel me? I did like a bell move. I kind of like find where's that nasty honk 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 type of nasally under the weather NyQuil frequency is what I call it, and you would really bring it down, and then usually maybe using something like a shelf to like really take the vocal and shape it like a bit of clay, you feel me, and seriously mold it. So you don't actually have a visual stimulus with this plugin, but sometimes that can be good for you too because you can't see what you're doing, you're just using your ears. So this is why the API vision is a really dope channel strip, because you can really get things that sound musical